absolutely wild as Vern Gagne's All-Star Wrestling goes coast to coast and continent to continent. The greatest wrestlers in the world.
He may be an apprentice carpenter, but I guarantee you he is a seasoned ring veteran.
I've been hit with bar stools, bar rags, barmaids.
I'm talking to you.
They're scared that Hulkamania's still running wild. Oh, yeah. I got a big fat wife and 9 kids at home, and I gotta feed them.
And take a look at Jesse the Body in real life.
Open your hand once if you would.
You want to see it?
This is absolutely unbelievable. Totally, completely out of control.
He's coming in over the top. Hey! Look out!
Hello, everybody. Welcome back into the #1 preeminent podcast dedicated to the American Wrestling Association. We call ourselves AWA Unleashed. And if we're going to go back to the territory days, you know what? I don't know if this is right, guys, but I'm going to say that we lost a loser leaves town match. But guess what? We're booked. We got booked in the territory again. Is that how this thing works? Or did I completely... that's how it works. I mean, I know that's how it works.
You know what? It doesn't matter if it's not how it works. You're the boss. Yeah. So that's how it works. Yeah,
I got the pencil.
Well, and you say loser leaves town match, even though we're back, does that still qualify us as losers?
Yes.
Well,
wait a minute. Yes.
Yeah.
Still. You think?
Define loser.
1, 2,
take a
3.
screenshot.
Oh man, it feels good to be back. I feel like I'm kind of trying to get back into a regular routine. And yeah, I just saw your chat. Yeah, we'll I'll take the odd. You can take the even. Man, it feels good to be back. It does. You know, vacation is great, but then you just kind of got to get back into a little bit of a rhythm. And here's how messed up my schedule was, and I do this to myself a lot, is, you know, we're sitting, we're like, okay, we're going to do it at such and such. No, I can't do it then. I'll do it this time. Then we're like, how about, 9 a.m.? Yeah, okay. Then I think Mick's like, hey, can we do it at 10? I'm like, yeah, 10's good. So I'm thinking 10. Then like an hour before this, Joe's like, we doing it at 9? I'm like, no. I'm like, nobody said 9. And then Joe showed me the screenshot where somebody said 9, and that somebody was me. And then I'm like, oh, shit, now I got to get ready. So this is me getting ready for the podcast. But man, a lot of bullshit on the front side, a lot of bullshit in the middle, and a lot of bullshit on the back. So
well, that covers it. I mean, that's it. We're covered in bullshit. So
that's our tagline.
Yeah. Another T-shirt idea. Yeah.
Covered in bullshit.
Another $10.
Another $10. Yeah. Woo. Where are we going to spend it? How you doing, guys?
All right. Well, we got a good show.
Yeah, and speaking of coming back and going back, we're going way back today.
We are going to go back to the year 1962 because we kind of want to do some different things, and we've had some more requests for the year in review. So before we took the break, we did, a couple of Q&As, try and get a lot of those answered. But now, we're going to go back 1962. Of course, guys, I know some of you aren't going to like it, but we're going to shill because I feel like I have to. Number one, I'm going to put up we were talking about $10. And it's really cool, though, because we've got a lot of really good stuff at tpublic.com. Unleash Plus, because it's not just Unleashed, it's Slick Mick stuff. So if you want to support your favorite legendary ring announcer or play-by-play broadcaster, I know I'm expecting one to show up momentarily. Just let me know when.
Howard Finkel passed away.
Wow.
Yeah.
Too soon, Mick. Too soon. Or if you want to support, I don't have a shirt for you, Joe. I think maybe we'll have to go back and do something with your nipples. God, that sounded bad.
It sure did. You do something with his nipples. Count me out.
Leave my nipples out of this. What did my nipples ever do to you?
Oh my God! How much time? Yeah, exactly. Also, the Patreon guys, we've got some things that we're lining up. You may or may not hear about one of them coming up a little bit later on. In a shout out, you guys don't even know who my shout out is. and because I've got it here. I haven't put it on the sheet. It's going to be a lot of fun. Go to our Patreon and sign up, $4.99 a month. When you do, let me know. Send me an email at awaunleashedpodcast@gmail.com, or DM me your address, your mailing address, because if I don't have it, I can't get you a little something in the mail. So there we go. Without further ado, are we ready?
We are, but a tip of the hat to Missy Hyatt.
Yes, thank you.
know, Missy did a little home video, about 30 seconds worth, to put
So
over
cool.
the Patreon, and we love Missy Hyatt, and she was just a gem of a person. I'd love to get her on the show, but Missy's a little hesitant about podcasts these days. But thank you, lovely Missy Hyatt. You are the best.
Yes, thank you, Missy. Very nice. I don't know if how much you paid her to do it, Mick. I'm guessing if it was you, it would have been involving cents and not talking common here. But yes, Missy, thank you very much.
Sorry, I just had to. I can't believe that Missy Hyatt knows my name. I got to be honest. I'm a little.
I think she read it off of a Post-it note.
It doesn't matter. Missy, if you would have told me 15-year-old me that Missy Hyatt knows my name, I'd have been like, wow. You tell me
You'd have
40.
disappeared into the bathroom with a box of Kleenex and a hand lotion.
Please take yourself out of the screen at least. Yeah, that's better. Elapsed time 45 minutes.
Wow,
Oh,
that's
good time.
so funny.
All right. Okay, let's get into the year 1962, Mick. And I know this is one that I think is going to be a good. It's going to be a good path down history, because we think of the AWA in 1961, I believe, was the inception. But why are we talking about 1962 for a promotion that is only a year old?
Fall of 1960, actually, Chris, was the inception.
Okay.
August of 1960, but we start 1962, and yeah, you're just a year and a couple of months into the history of the AWA as a promotion. Certainly, there was the Minneapolis territory before that, belonging to the NWA. But 1962, in a lot of ways, was kind of a transitional time for the AWA in terms of championships. They were just starting a little bit to broaden their scope. They didn't hit a lot of big-time cities yet, but the talent roster, as I look back in 1962 and prior, when it was just the Minneapolis territory, is off the charts. And I really enjoy doing these because it gives you an opportunity, and Joe and everybody out there, to kind of relive history from the beginning.
Well, I have to add that it's especially nice for me doing anything from the 60s because, I was born in 65. So this goes obviously 3 years prior. But up until, I'll say about 1970, how much do you remember in the first few years of your life? So this is basically a history lesson for me from the AWA. Yeah, I know the names and some of the stories, but not nearly as well as you, Mick, because you were still. No, it's not a shot at your age, but you were around and available to learn, gather, and maybe experience some of those stories through All-Star Wrestling. So getting back to 62.
Well, Mick was just graduating college in 62. So
I didn't graduate.
Oh, yeah. Beauty.
I was on my 87th incomplete in 1960.
I thought that's when he retired, but that aside. Mick, going back to 62. Well, by the way, if you did retire then, let's see. God.
Just kill some more time, Chupik.
You'd be the oldest human being alive. Anyway, so let's get to 62. Who was the champ and who were the tag team champions?
Very, very interesting, because going into 1962, the champion, imagine this, was Vern Gagne. And Vern had, of course, been proclaimed the first, not Pat O'Connor, Vern Gagne, the first AWA champion. And into 1962, he held the title, but Surprisingly, only 9 days into 1962, he lost the championship for a handful of months. Also interesting is the tag team champion. Now, there's Texas Bob Geigel. Bob Geigel, God love him. Uh, Old Texas Bob, former NWA president. He was a mainstay not only as a singles wrestler, but as a tag team wrestler back in the AWA days. Again, Texas Bob from Algona, Iowa. I never quite understood calling him Texas Bob, but nonetheless, he teamed up with a man named Baron Otto von Krupp here in the AWA area, and longtime wrestling fans will recognize Baron Otto von Krupp as Boris Malenko, aka Larry Simon. He transformed into Professor Boris Malenko when he left the AWA, but he was one of the tag team champions early on in 1962. So, very, very interesting indeed.
So I'll go ahead, Joe. I'm
I
sorry.
was going to say, I just sort of chuckle. What was Otto's real name?
Larry Simon.
So Larry Simon goes to a German-sounding baron to a Russian. You gotta love professional wrestling.
Baron von Otto Kruschke, or I mean Khrushchev, or I mean I don't know. So before we get to the other champions here, let me ask you this, Mick, because you talked about the talent. This is kind of one of the main things. Don't territories historically have to build up before they can attract big name talent? Like, why do you think the AWA right off the bat was able to generate the interest and get these so much talent when it first started? Is that Vern? Is that, I mean, like, do you have any idea why that might have been?
Carryover. I mentioned at the outset, it was an NWA territory. So you change it to the AWA in August of 1960, but you've still got this incredible roster, excuse me, from the 1950s that is leading you.
So they were still in
next
partnership with the NWA at that time, right?
at that time. Well, yeah, until August of 1960.
Okay.
Then,
I was wondering if that kind of went a little bit longer. Okay. All right.
But the talent stayed. A lot of the mainstay stars that were wrestling in Minneapolis as NWA stayed for the inception of the AWA. So you had a lot of carryover talent. And then once the AWA started getting its feet underneath them, you got more talent. And, in the case of some of the guys, they even changed names from when they were in the Minneapolis territory to the time that they were in the AWA territory. Bill Miller, Mr. M, had wrestled here.
Yeah. Talk about
Bill
some of the other guys who had single titles. Didn't he hold a title in '62?
He absolutely did.
Okay.
And as a matter of fact, he's the guy that Vern Gagne lost the championship to in January of 1962. Mr. M had been here in 1961, beat a whole host of guys. And in January of 1962, and there's Dr. Bill Miller, sans the mask. That was probably late 1950s-ish that we got Dr. Bill before he transformed into the mysterious... Ladies and gentlemen, there he is. Dr. Bill Miller looks a little bit different.
I think somebody wants to go outside. So, hey, it's live podcast. So I'll be back in 30.
Wow. Well, all right. So continuing on with the Dr. Bill Miller, Mr. M saga. Bill Miller, as Mr. M in 1961, established a great track record, beating anybody who is everybody back then. So January 1962, he defeats Vern Gagne. And Chris, I believe we have a photograph of that January 1962 Mr. M. Vern Gagne match. I believe it's there in your photos.
Yeah, I'm for somehow when Joe took his dog out, somehow my connection got removed too. So I don't know what your dog did in my connection. It was weird.
Well,
This
dog
podcast,
world,
yeah, the dog is going to lift his leg on this podcast justifiably.
Oh yeah, I had it because Joe was going to take his dog out, and then I'm like, okay, I'm just going to bring up the.
Do we have that picture at all?
Yes, we
Okay.
do. It is.
Let's take a look at it.
Yep, right there. There it is. Sorry, guys.
There's Mr. M. That is Bill Miller. Interesting mask, by the way, Mr. M. Bill Miller. Almost looked like one of those. It looks like a football that they actually cut the eye holes and mouth out of. And again, January 1962. I keep referring to this because Mr. M was the guy that beat Vern Gagne for the championship early on. He held it until August of 1962. And there is the match from January 62. The match everyone has been requesting. And yes, it really was a big deal back then because it was an era of kayfabe, because most people did not know who Bill Miller, Mr. M, was. There's your follow-up match when Vern regained the championship, and this is August 21st of 1962. So from January till August, so about 8 months, 8.5, almost 9 months, Mr. M held the championship. This is the match where Vern turned Mr. M's mask around and took advantage of the fact that M allegedly couldn't see and defeated Mr. M to win the championship back. It's also the night, we've talked about this many times, when Bill Miller, having just wrestled, is walking back from the locker room and a fan hits him over the head with a 2x6 wooden plank with a steel spike on the end of it. And Bill Miller, of course, did not have the mask on at the time to protect any skin, and it went into his brain, literally. He's a veterinarian, or was by trade, and he said, the damn thing got my brain. So, but Mr. M, Bill Miller, and Vern Gagne were the two AWA singles champions in 1962. And Baron Otto von Krupp and Bob Geil, the tag team champions, going into 1962.
So regarding the tag team championship, we only had, as you mentioned, the two champions in the AWA in 62. What was the tag team run for the year? What does that look like?
This is very interesting because Baron Otto von Krupp left the territory, and I believe there was an injury storyline. He left early on in 1962. So the AWA held a tag team tournament to determine the new tag team champions. And lo and behold, Larry Hennig and a guy named Duke Hoffman, and look at that young Larry Hennig there. Larry, just a couple of years into the business, Larry Hennig and Duke Hoffman were upset winners of that tag team championship tournament. So they became the champions kind of by default, winning that title. Again, after Otto von Krupp left the territory, and I think shortly after that was his Boris Malenko transformation. But Larry Hennig and Duke Hoffman, kind of a blip on the radar in the AWA history.
Quick question: when Larry won that title, tag team title, was he a babyface or a heel at that point?
Babyface,
Okay.
through and through. He had gone to Japan after this and came back as a heel. He wrestled as the Viking in Japan, complete with the headgear and the horns and everything else. Came back, and it was the old angle of the student turning on the teacher, because Larry had been trained, of course, by Vern Gagne. So 1963, Larry turned full-fledged heel and remained that way till 1974. So there you go.
Nice. Anybody else on the tag team championships, or did Larry and Hoffman hold it for the year?
They did not. And now you're going to get into something really interesting. Larry Hennig and Duke Hoffman lose the tag team title to the aforementioned Texas Bob Geigel and our buddy Stan Crusher Kowalski. Stan, of course, had been a tag team champion before with Tiny Mills. He regains the championship with Bob Geigel as his tag team partner in 1962. Now, here's where it gets interesting. And there's another picture of Texas Bob from Iowa. Plane overshot the runway just a little bit there. Stan Kowalski and Bob Geigel lose the tag team championship to a combination known as Art and Stan Nielsen. And I put the quotes in there, and there are the Nielsen brothers. That is Stan Nielsen on the left, who had wrestled here as Stan Lasowski, Crusher's brother, back in the 1950s when it was still NWA Minneapolis territory. So his real name was Stan Hollick. So first he's a Lasowski, and then he's a Nielsen. The Nielsen brothers defeated Hennig and Hoffman in Cincinnati, Ohio. The only problem was the match never happened. It was a phantom title change. It kind of set the table for future AWA decisions down the road, even the next 20, 30 years. But there was no match in Cincinnati. The Nielsen brothers did not beat Hennig and Hoffman for the title, although, that's what they told us, and we believed them. So the Nielsen brothers are now the AWA Tag Team Champions. How do you like that?
But, I mean, why? I mean, was there any... I mean, shit happens. Was there an injury? Did one of them leave the territory? Did they just want to change the straps? I mean, what was the behind-the-scenes story on that? As
far as I know, it was just they wanted to change the straps. I could be wrong. I'm not an authority. I'm not an authority on the business. I don't know all the P's and Q's. But yeah, all of a sudden, the Nielsen brothers are tag team champions. And they, in turn, lost the tag team title to Mr. High and Mr. Low, Doug Gilbert and Dick Steinborn. And there is Doug on the left, Dick Steinborn on the right. Very popular tag team here in the AWA area. Gilbert and Steinborn, and of course, Doug infamously was the referee for Vern Gagne's retirement match with Nick Bockwinkel approximately 20 years later when he, got fired mid-match. But Gilbert and Steinborn, in turn, turned around and lost the tag team championship that year to a very, I don't want to say underrated in the history of wrestling, but a lot of fans don't know how good these guys were, and that is the Kalmakoff brothers. They, of course, were not real brothers. That is Karl Kalmakoff on the left and Ivan Kalmakoff on the right. They defeated Doug Gilbert and Dick Steinborn to win the AWA tag team.
I feel like they're modeling khakis with belts right now.
Yeah, and you notice back in the day, and even for me these days, the belt is pretty much almost throat level. Some of these guys, but
that's how you keep your trousers up.
That's exactly right. But the Kalmakoff brothers, they were champions throughout the remainder of the year. So you definitely had a lot of bait and switch, and here and there in the tag team division, not so much in the singles division.
How'd they cover that on All Star Wrestling, Mick? I mean, in terms of the angle. I mean, shall we say, did they, was it still pretty much a jobber, going using the old school vernacular, the jobber or enhancement talent putting over the guys? Or, I mean, for any of these, I mean, tell us a little bit about the All-Star Wrestling perspective of it.
It was exactly as you said, Joe. It was the enhancement guys putting over the stars. I mean, that was the primary formula for years and years. And, it's a tried and true. Some of the matches, 2 out of 3 falls. Some of them were literally squash matches. Every once in a while, they will put a ringer in there against a top talent. and maybe go to a draw or have the talent get beat on television or whatever you. But yeah, it was the old school way of doing things, and of course they would throw in their angles. Kalmakoffs had been here before; they had been here for a while. And the way they set this up on TV with Gilbert and Steinborn is that Dick Steinborn's grandfather allegedly gave him an heirloom camera, an old camera. And Dick is taking pictures of the Kalmakoff brothers. He is scouting them on television. And they took and they broke his granddaddy's camera. They picked it up and they smashed that sucker right on the All-Star Wrestling TV studio. And I'm telling you, what could be worse? Seriously, what could be worse than having your camera broken? If that's not going to be the impetus for a feud, and we'll put the title on the line against these guys, they did, and maybe Dick was a little bit hasty in putting the championship on the line because it didn't turn out very well for him or the camera or the title.
You got to love the real world simplicity, shall we say, of that angle. You think you could get by doing that today?
Oh my God, are you kidding me?
It is, yeah, very, very simple. I mean, a camera, and all of a sudden you break that and all hell breaks loose. How about attendance, Mick? Like, what was attendance like in '62?
What you would think today when you talk about attendances of 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, you think, is that it?
Yeah.
But back then, that was pretty good. They did not have the St. Paul Civic Center at the time. They had the Minneapolis Auditorium and the St. Paul Auditorium. Every once in a while, they would spike a crowd in the 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 range, but that was pretty solid. I would say, on average, for your average card, anywhere between 3,000 and 4,000. But they were happy with it. Back in the day, different era. And they were running consistently, Minneapolis to St. Paul, week after week after week. It wasn't a once a month card type situation. And I should add too, and I know this was actually one of our questions going forward. The AWA had not begun its real expansion to major cities yet. I know they were running Winnipeg on a pretty consistent basis. As I look back on the results sheets from 1962, there's a lot of spot shows. Not only in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and surrounding area, Mankato or St. Cloud or what have you, but also they would go into Grand Forks, North Dakota, or into Bismarck, or Mason City, Iowa, or whatever. That was kind of the AWA territory as they were getting their feet wet. So in terms of a national exposure, not quite yet.
One thing I want to comment about the attendance and to put things into perspective. For those of you that are on social media, I've seen photos of when Met Stadium was first built, where now the Mall of America is. And the overhead photo is a stadium, and there's nothing but grass fields. So what the hell does that have to do with attendance? Well, it relates to the population of the Twin Cities was not what it is or what it was in the 80s when the Civic Center was being sold out. And I don't know what the numbers are, but it was a fraction of what it was as time goes on. So if Bloomington has a population of 1 million people now, or let's say the Twin Cities fits a few million people now, I'm guessing back then it was still in the hundreds of thousands.
Absolutely.
So to get 3,000-4,000 people back in those days is the equivalent of maybe getting that 20,000, well, just under 20,000 that the Civic Center would get. So it was still a very big crowd to get 3,000-4,000 people in 1962.
And an interesting point I would add to this, Joe, is they were doing maybe the 7,000 to 8,000 prior to that, when it was still NWA territory. But lo and behold, 1961, you got some competition now. You got the Minnesota Twins and the Minnesota Vikings. Yeah. They were not here prior to that. You had the Lakers, in town. Of course, they left Minneapolis. But the AWA was kind of its own thing for a long time. So the crowds were in the 7,000-8,000 range. Now you're splitting them with major league sports. And that attendance is going to take a hit. You're spreading that entertainment dollar.
Yeah, and I think that's why at the beginning, I was like, okay, 61. I think for me, like, yeah, a lot of things started in 61. I think when you're talking about the fall of 60, to me, naturally, that time frame, it just kind of all gets bundled up into one kind of like axis for a lot of things. Did you have a follow-up, Joe? Because then I wanted to ask more about Bill Miller. Okay.
No, that was just my follow-up comment about the attendance thing. Different time, different era. So you gotta keep that in perspective.
So when it comes to Bill Miller, I mean, we're still kayfabe. I mean, obviously still kayfabe. How do you keep that a secret when, number one, he's been here, the territory is not real big, but yet you're wanting to repackage him as this masked man who's going to sit and eventually challenge for the championship? I mean, how can you do that back in that time? I mean, certainly even those kayfabe fans would have caught on.
Yes and no. First of all, and I don't mean this in a disparaging way, I'm not calling them monkeys. Wrestling fans have a short attention span. And I point to Killer Kowalski and John Studd, Monster O'Connor, who teamed up in New York as the Executioners. They had been there before. I mentioned Stan Nielsen before, who had been here just a couple of years earlier as Stan Lasowski. Bill Miller, was here in the late 1950s, and then he's gone for a while. He comes back with a mask on, and fans didn't know who he was. The other thing was, in terms of protecting kayfabe, Chris, with something like that, the whole business, again, was kayfabe. I mean, you're 20 years, 22 years away from the business being exposed. There were some people who knew what they knew, but on the overall, they did a very good job of not only protecting the business itself, but an identity of a guy like Bill Miller. And I remember there were all kinds of speculations. He's Gene Kiniski. He's Hard-Boiled Haggerty. He's this, he's that. And they even did an interview. The Star Tribune did an interview with Bill Miller while he's still wearing the Mr. M mask. And he said, some people have even said I'm a guy named Bill Miller. They're all wrong. Well, he invokes his name in there along with the Hard-Boiled Haggertys and the Gene Kiniskis. And okay, well, I guess it's not Bill Miller. So, he just told us it's not. So it was a totally different era. And needless to say, could they get away with it today? Oh, fuck no. They couldn't get away with it for a minute and a half today, let alone for the couple of years that Bill Miller was here. It would be on the internet before he came into a territory. That Joe Blow was going in as the masked Mr. Dingleberry, in Louisville. It's just a totally different era.
Well, and besides the internet, there were no rag sheets.
Right.
This was still the infancy, certainly for the AWA, but in a lot of ways for professional wrestling, even though it had, I believe it was in 1949, I think, on the Dumont Network is when wrestling got onto television. So, we're approximately 13 years into it. No internet, no rag sheet. Only thing that you had were local newspapers and the weekly TV show to try to decipher what the hell is going on. But Mick, so sticking with Big Miller, I'm going to throw Vern in there as well. What are some other big names from the year? Who are the other challengers for that AWA championship belt?
I think this is great. And again, Bill Miller, for the most part, is the champion in 1962. And Chris, I know we've got at least a handful of pictures of some of the guys that challenged Bill Miller for the championship. Now, Tiny Mills, one half of the AWA Tag Team Champions. Tiny was a heel. But Mr. M, Bill Miller, it was the old, I hate this guy more than I hate that guy, so you're the baby face. Tiny was cheered against Mr. M. Obviously, did not win the championship, but Tiny was one, for example, that Mr. M, and I keep going back and forth, Bill Miller and Mr. M. At this point, he's still Mr. M. Let's get that clear. Pat O'Connor, this guy here. No, he was not the first AWA champion, but he came back to the AWA in 1962. He had been here before when it was the Minneapolis NWA territory. Came back in 1962 and 61, and he had a feud with Mr. M. But again, even the former champion, Pat O'Connor, former NWA champion, couldn't get the job done. There's a guy who had a couple of shots, and he's just getting started in the wrestling business, and that is our old buddy, Blackjack Lanza, and his wife and daughter. That picture from mid 1960s, I believe. Jack was Cowboy Jack Lanza, a very, very popular babyface, but another guy that couldn't get the job done against Mr. M. And I should remind people too, Mr. M not only with the championship, but if you beat him in if it's a 1-fall match or 2 out of 3 falls, he's not only going to take the mask off, but if you can pin him within 20 minutes, he's going to give you $2,000. So there was all kinds of caveats surrounding Mr. M. Yukon Eric, legendary in professional wrestling. He was a mainstay here in the AWA area, not only in the 1960s, but prior to that, during the NWA territory days here. He had some shots against Mr. M, couldn't get the job done. Sadly, Yukon Eric in 1965 took his own life. So, but he was another one of the big monsters that attempted to win the championship from Mr. M. Joe Scarpello, and that is an early picture of Joe, because when he came here in the AWA in 1960, he did not have a lot of hair left on his head. Tremendous amateur wrestler at Iowa, I believe, or Iowa State. I want to say Iowa. Teamed up with Vern, and they challenged Stan Kowalski and Tiny Mills for the championship. Couldn't get the job done then, and he had some shots at Mr. M here, and also fell short of the mark. So Bill Miller, as Mr. M, had a pretty damn good run here in the AWA.
Wow.
There's another guy that he had a shot at. And, that's a little picture of Larry Hennig. We really don't see. Larry looks like he's right out of the womb in that picture. I don't know how old he was yet, but again, Larry is still a baby face, and he had a hold similar to Blackjack Lanza's Texas Brainbuster. And I forget what he called it. He, in a TV angle, he actually demonstrated his hold on Mr. M, who didn't think much of the hold. And of course, Larry, put him down, and that kind of set up their feud. Doug Gilbert, who we mentioned before as a tag team champion with Dick Steinborg, he's a mainstay in the AWA in 1962, and he had a series of matches with Mr. M, Bill Miller. Went to a couple of draws, disqualifications, couldn't get the job done, but he was the first guy to beat Mr. M within 20 minutes in 1 fall to collect that $2,000.
And I know we got another one to go on, but I've a question about Bill Miller's mask, or Mr. M. Was it a leather mask?
In that picture, it looks like a leather mask. When I don't remember him ever wrestling in that leather mask. I think that was just a publicity shot, because he had your typical nylon mask when he wrestled here in the AWA as Mysterious Mr. M. I can't imagine for a minute that he would have survived, 10 minutes, let alone 20 or 30, 45 minutes in a match with the leather mask. I think that was a publicity shot.
Well, that's why I was curious. I'm like, oh God, leather doesn't exactly breathe well. And if you're doing, back in those days, a 20-minute match was not uncommon.
Right.
No, thank you.
No, thank you at all. I'm pretty sure, and I don't even know if they superimposed that M on there, or if they, the stitched it on last minute in the middle of his forehead there. It looks kind of suspect, but we're into conspiracy theories these days, so I just figured I'd go there. But again, I can't emphasize enough what a great talent Bill Miller was. I mentioned veterinarian by trade. He was a tremendous amateur wrestler at the University of Ohio. He's from Columbus, Ohio, or was. And he and Vern Gagne knew each other very, very well, not only from their collegiate days, but when Miller was here as Bill Miller, prior to him putting on the Mr. M mask. So a lot of history between Bill and Vern.
Okay, I think we've got one more to cover from your list of people, do we not?
Yes, I am bringing it up now, and I believe this is the last name, Mick, that we wanted to cover, and there he is. So tell us about Dale Lewis.
Dale Lewis, another great star. In the AWA, in the history of the AWA, you don't hear a lot about Dale Lewis. He didn't do a lot of main eventing. He was a tremendous amateur wrestler from Oklahoma. Later on in his career, he turned heel, and I believe they called him Professor Dale Lewis, if I'm not mistaken. But he was a great babyface, very popular with the crowd, very over, and he was another one of these guys, Wilbur Snyder, people like that they would put in the ring with Mr. M, kind of a one-off, but it kind of establishes that Mr. M is just running through all these challengers as AWA champion before the eventual rematch loss to Vern.
Okay, hold on here. Hold on. I've got. So we just went through a list of challengers for the AWA championship in 1962.
Correct.
The list is not done. There's one more guy that I've got to inquire about that I can't believe was not on that list, Mick. I'm talking about some guy from South Milwaukee. Might have liked the polka. Rumor has it that he liked barmaids, bar rags, and bar stools. I'm talking about the one, the only, the Crusher. Was he around in 62?
He was. And he was around in 52 and 32 and, every other two that you could probably.
In 100 megaton watt arms.
That's exactly. Crusher, of course, was here again in the 1950s as Reggie the Crusher Lasowski, teaming up with his brother, Stan Lasowski. Comes back in 1962, and he's got a heel run. Crusher was 3 years away from being a babyface, Mr. Chupik, here in the AWA area. He's running through a list of these babyface challengers. He's the rough, tough guy, no nonsense from Milwaukee. Started a lot of riots, a lot of brawls. He was nothing short of a bulldozer. And this is the first matchup back in 1962, December of 1962. It's the Crusher against Vern Gagne for the championship, the AWA Heavyweight Championship. Crusher, of course, the heel, Vern, the beloved babyface. A lot of people thought Crusher was going to go over. Even among the casual fans, they thought, well, this is, Vern just regained the title, from Bill Miller, but last January. But this guy is going to be the one to do it. Nobody's going to stop the Crusher. Vern stopped him, at least temporarily. Crusher won the championship for a short time, about 6 months later. But yes, your beloved Crusher was as big a heel as you are. Polish, if you could, if you can imagine that. I don't know what it is with you guys, with you beer drinking, Polish guys. You heel, and all of a sudden you do a baby face turn, and we're all supposed to buy it.
Well,
I
just
Pardon me?
remember. I mean, ask Barry Darso. I'm all heel all the time.
You ask them.
I will next time we have him on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
So you're talking about Vern holding off Crusher. You guys know why Vern was able to hold off Crusher, right?
There's no doubt about it. You know, we
I
talked.
mean,
Yeah,
yeah.
Chris,
If he
you
cheated,
No. I know where you're going with this, Chris. There's a reason, and there it is. There it is, right there. You know, you
Mhm.
talk about, you know, the guys who use steroids and everything else, and you know, muscle enhancers and monkey gland and everything else going forward. Back in the
That's
day,
it.
this is all you needed right here. I'm pointing out natural organic base, and not only that, you refuse substitutes. You didn't want. Marty O'Neill used to say, and I'm quoting him, seriously am. When you go into your favorite store and they say, "Why don't you try this? Why don't you try that?" You say, I want the real thing. I want Speed with Vern Gagne's picture and signature on the label. All better stores. You didn't get this at the corner store.
All
You had
better
to go-
stores. My God, what? I mean, what about the really bad retailers? Come on. I mean, you got to go where you.
Vern Gagne was a bastion of goodness, you know, in just about every way, shape, or form. And Speed, of course, is one of his products back in the 1960s, along with Protein Power Pack, Geralac, Ziggity Who 12 for kids.
What?
You heard me.
That's not a real thing.
Vern Gagne marketed a vitamin to kids because he was.
No, he didn't call it Ziggity Who.
He did. Because Vern would come out on television, he would say, as he's pushing Speed, he would say, even kids, you want that energy, you want that old Ziggity Who. And he came up with Ziggity Who. I don't know where the 12 came from. You know, maybe it was 12 years and under. I don't know. But Vern had a whole line of vitamins up to and including the Dynapower that gave George Gadasky the worst case of stomach flu and head cold that he ever had. But there it is right there.
Schnips.
Yeah. And there you see it right there. So if there's any question about what made Vern Gagne, right there. Right there. I'm getting teary-eyed. I'm getting choked up like Solo Sikoa gave me a Samoan spike.
Ziggity Who.
Well, you know, the first thing that I noticed on there was, I mean, obviously the whole Speed thing, I chuckle at, but the spelling of Vern's first name, how it's actually Laverne Gagne, but it's VERN, where when I was doing graphics, it always had an E when Vern signed his autograph, you know, signed stuff for me. It was always with an E. Why, how, what, where?
Yeah, I think you're
Ziggity
getting the
doo, who,
knockoff.
how, whatever.
I think you're getting the knockoff stuff because it doesn't have the E on it.
Well, that shows what you guys know, and that's why I'm here to set everything straight.
That's true. That's true.
Especially Chupik, you being a businessman, you own your own company and everything else, playing with dollars and cents. It was strictly a cost-cutting measure. It would have cost Vern so much money to put the E on the end of his name for advertising purposes. You know, it might have been another 25, 30 cents. Back in the day, you fast forward to where we are now, it might be $1.10. So Vern decided, all right, you know, where I can't take it off of Speed or it'd be Speed or Gerspad or something. So he did, or Gag. You didn't want to do that. So Vern opted to drop the E. How the fuck do I know why?
Well, I got to give you this, Nick. I mean, part of what you said, I mean, obviously, you know, it's a rib about how, you know, Vern would have had to pay more. But back in that day, it was not done on the computer. It was actually typeset and run through a printing press. So I don't know, maybe the guy liked Crusher more than Vern at that point and said, "Fuck Vern, I'm not going to put a knee at the end of his name." The guy who's setting the types. Who knows? Who knows? But I still find it
fired. He would have been fired immediately. And this is, I'm going to tell you how bad, not only how bad the podcast was, but where my life is at. The guy who did publicity and put together the ads his name was Bob Bork, B-O-R-K. Who in the hell in the wrestling world is going to remember Bob Bork? Honestly, that's it. Let's just end it right now. Seriously, I don't even think Wally didn't even know it was Bob Burke, Bob Blackstone, Bob Blackburk, Bob Bork. There you go. There's a trivia question for you in Waterloo. You.
Wow.
Oh, Mick coming in hot.
Yeah. We'll be ready for you in Waterloo this year.
Yeah,
Put that Bob Bork question in there.
I think I'm going to become a wrestling manager, and I'm going to go by the name of Bob Bork, but I'm going to add a J to the last name. Fuck, I'll pay the extra 30 cents for the typesetting.
Oh my gosh. Oh,
boy,
God,
when you don't get on this podcast that you don't want. I just like Barron used to say about his souvenir shop, if you don't need it, we got it.
Oh, well, one thing we do have are our shout outs here, guys. Mick, go ahead.
John Lloyd, what a terrific individual. John has been a longtime wrestling fan. He and I worked together on the old Iron Dukes NCWA wrestling television broadcast back in the day. Never got paid because it was, only for TV. You don't get paid for TV. But John Lloyd is so loyal, never misses a podcast. One of my great friends. Hats off, John.
So my shout out goes
hasn't missed a podcast until this one.
he's clicked off of it by
he
didn't even off of, what the fuck is this, TV?
Well, good. We'll take an L out of his name too. He's got an extra one in there.
So he'll go from Lloyd to Lloyd.
My shout out goes to, and there's no way to take any letters out of this one. Well, I guess you could if you wanted to save a nickel, but a couple of days ago, I had the pleasure of interviewing this person on behalf of Powertown, because for the very first time, she will have a Medusa action figure, not a Lundra Blaze, but a Medusa action figure, and it looks fantastic. So I interviewed Deuce, and of course we worked together in the mid to late 80s with the AWA. And so my shout out goes to her for her getting her first Medusa action figure. And shall we just say that there might be a pretty good possibility that Medusa Michelli might want to actually come on to this podcast. So stay tuned. The angle has just begun.
Well,
I like it. You're bringing the Deuce. I'm bringing the Bam, because I had a chance to talk with Jesse Creasa, ODB's meet and greet food truck.
No, not my nipples.
I know.
God.
We're going to have I don't think that's a contest you're going to win, Joe. No matter how big your nipples are, I don't think you're going to win that Bam contest. Now, you can keep trying. I mean, if you want to go through the reps and train and take your Jairus speed.
Her BAMs are capital letters with like 5 M's on the end of it, and mine's just a smaller case B.
Yeah.
Oh, boy, did this go off the rails.
Well, just when I was going to give Jesse
about a year and a half ago when you were on this damn podcast.
That's true.
Anyway, I don't know where to go from that one. I can't even make the transition. But no, I talked to her at Taste of Minnesota. We talked for a little bit, and she said that she would also be willing, and that may be a Patreon, that we may get Jesse on the Patreon. So there we go.
So next little side note on that.
Yeah.
I actually worked with her, shall we say, her pre-BAM days. She was a part of a pilot that we recorded in Minneapolis for,
Really?
it was called Crush. And that was a, shall we say, an updated version of the original Glow TV series. So
Okay.
if we have her on, I actually have some of that footage from that pilot.
And we
If
won't
I'm
tell
not
her about it.
mistaken,
We'll just
I
show it
think
to her.
she was, I think her gimmick was the exterminator. And again, it was
Pre-BAM.
pre-BAM.
You
Yes.
don't have to do the motions. We know what it means.
Oh no, hey, what? She never does the motions. She's proud of
Let
it.
her do the motions.
Yes,
You've been
let her
doing
do
the
the
motions.
motions.
Her watch. We don't need to see you. We don't need it.
No.
And not only that, you guys, you talk to Medusa, you talk to ODB. I talked to some woman in Target who wouldn't move her cart out of the way in the checkout line. That's the kind of week I had, guys.
Well, I'm sorry, guys, but I'm going to let you in on a little secret. Remember when I left and I blamed it on Joe's dog? Sorry. I was thinking